auto mapping functions that you can go and target different parts of the name in order to make it happen. So yeah, always start with the root key and then always separate your words. Instead of using a space, use an underscore. Oh, I appreciate the raid. Hey, yo. So yeah, we're just talking about samplers here. So always use an underscore, just because when you're actually using some type of engine that's looking at file types and file names, which is contact, NN19, NNX10, NNX10, NNXT. I added an ing instead of an ing. They're really close. Can't blame me. Yo, yo, yo. Okay, so yeah, definitely really crucial that you start from here and you know how to name your shit, because, it's literally going to be like an actual trickle down thing here, where if you don't have it set up correctly, then it's going to be all over the place. So there's ways to freeze your files and stuff, and I created this little like template session just so you can go and drop anything in here. And you notice that I started with the root note first and underscore, so you can go and add whatever. So this is just a sine wave coming from operator, but I can go and do a bunch of stuff to it and create a chromatic sampler. So there's a difference between chromatic and like octave based. So you can record one sound for one octave and then stretch it out. You don't have to do it for every single note, but if you're working with like a piano sampler or something big in contact, then it's definitely crucial. Speaking of contact, so I'm going to load up some contact players now. We're going to kind of talk about a couple different ones in here that I use a lot and are just, that's fine. That's totally fine, contact. I'm not worried. So that's the memory server. Don't worry about that. Pretty much a separate server, and we talked about this. Separate server that offloads all of your samples into RAM, so it's not using the cache from the software that you're mounting it in, which would be Ableton. In a 32-bit environment, you're only allowed to use 50% of your RAM cache per app. So now that's different in 64, but you still want to have the ability to go outside of that. A lot of things in Max for Live, or Max in general, Max is called Max because it maxes out your computer, so it has no limitation. Literally, you can build a server farm around Max and it would just assimilate like a Borg. All right, so I use a bunch of these. I like the Gamelon. This one's really simple. So I actually have my keyboard set up today. Okay, so every single player in here, which it is a player because this is playing all these samples that are mapped out for you inside of here. So we're going to actually play around with not this sampler, but creating our own inside of Contact today. Just a little bit, just a tiny bit. We're not going to go like super deep into the wave editor and the script editor yet. Script editor is pretty cool. So what you're looking at is the script. That's all they wrote in the script, yo, of the Balinese gamelan. All right, so pretty much everything you'll see on like these different UIs is how to kind of like sync it, how to play different loops that are kind of baked into it. So this has a few different ranges built into it. So it actually has around about C1 to about C, actually no, C2 to C1. There's a full key scale that I can actually play. So this has velocity layers in it, meaning when I play it harder, faster, stronger, and better, then it gets better and stronger on the sample too. So it chooses a different sample. So when you're looking in the mapping editor again, all these layers, left to right is your key scale, up and down is your velocity layers. So you can see that there's a ton of different samples that they put in there to kind of like make it sound more real. So you cannot make anything sound this real with sampling if you don't have these functions. So if you're building a plugin around a sampler, then you would actually be just making contact. Literally just one little player inside of contact. Because what contact is it's reactor mixed with a sampler. So reactor has sampling, reactor has scripting, and there's a ton of different samplers that work exactly like contact from then. There used to be this thing called core, where you were able to use all of them in one environment, and then contact kind of came out of that, and then core just went away entirely. So you can actually use reactor as a sampling engine inside of middleware, as I've kind of said inside of the outline there, which is using it with Fmod Studio or WYs or anything that interfaces with Unity or Unreal, which are both game engines. So that also comes into play a lot. Okay, so that's just one of them. That one's super cool. Oh, Alicia's keys. Where are you? That's a bummer. I might be able to find it. That actually might be a really good example of how to source your files in a second here. But I actually want to load up one of these drummers. Okay. Let's see, studio drummer. Modern drummer's good. Okay, so I'm going to load up the full. So the full has all the different velocity layers and all that stuff. And also another thing, if you missed the last class and you're like showing up today, definitely want to keep in mind what MIDI channel you're plugged into here. So you want it to be set to Omni if you're going to be using more than one contact instrument inside of its shell. So you definitely want to keep that in mind. Whoops. Okay, so inside of this, you can select all of your instruments or your drums individually, and you have a little mixer for each of them. So you have these buses which send the signal from the sampler itself into an overhead mix section. So you have a whole mixer here for your drum kit as well. Yeah, so you have that for pretty much each different instrument here, or drum. You have 3 different snare types. They made a nice little animation there. And you can see when I switch it, it goes and sources a different bank of files, because those are a ton of different velocity layers in this one. I can show you how crazy this is going to look. I definitely have to, yeah, so I can't even, there's just so many. The drum samplers are probably the most sophisticated out of all of them because they have to be the most real. So I use this a lot when I'm doing like halftime shit, and then also drum and bass. So this is definitely a go-to. I also have Superior Drummer, and I use that a lot too. So we'll definitely get into that at some point. Maybe I'll do that as well with Battery 4, you know, and I'll just add that to the class. Because Superior Drummer is definitely a really extreme player. So what's really cool about this as well is that you have a little mixer inside of it with an actual effects chain. So you have a transient designer, compressor, tape saturator, and then built-in EQ. And this is all like SSL emulators that they've think they teamed up with Softtube or bought Softtube, one of the two. So these are all like Softtube plugins that they have separate as well. So those are built into Contact. Contact 6 has a few of the newer plugins built into it now. And then it also has a wavetable oscillator built into it because they're pretty much trying to stand up with Omnisphere. Big mistake, I feel as though they made this huge mistake. On the move up to Contact 6 is they made it not backwards compatible at all. So yeah, that was one of the huge things with Contact. You can create these crazy samplers here, and then you can actually export them. You could create like a drummer here, even use this and export this into like a huge like digital sampler like the Kronos or some other like insane modular brain that can actually digest different files this can actually output. But now Contact 6 doesn't have any of that, and they really want to push their players. So I'm not really about it. But still about this. So in the settings here, on each of the different channels, you have both a mixer for if you have different mic setups. So these mic setups are groups of samples as well that are being blended together. And so their volume is being controlled through script. In the background, it's a whole different set group of samples that also has velocity layering, but it's recorded from a different mic setup. What's great is these are all like phase aligned for you. So I used to use this a lot when I was like replacing drums for my metal band and shit. All right, so you only have a few different, routing types, but kind of gives you all the, needed ones, which is EQ before transient design, before compression, before saturation. So you'll notice that tape is usually at the end of the chain, so saturation should be used this way when you're processing drums as kind of like a sealant, where that all that phase is being modulated from an EQ, because every time you use an EQ, you're introducing phase and phase discrepancies between left and right channels, especially if it's analog EQ with only 2 to 3 bands. This adds a lot of coloration, and they call it smearing. So unsmear by saturating, and it kind of glues everything back together. Glue compressors are also really good for that as well. Hence why they switch the actual ordering of both of these. So you can actually do compression before or after saturation, or do compression before transient designing, which this is really smart because you can shape the drum before it goes in the compressor, and then use the compressor to level out the sustain, and then push up the transients with the transient designer, and then saturate it and kind of boost it up again. So all that stuff is pretty cool. You can also send it out of here if you don't want to be locked into just a stereo track. So you can actually patch this into a bunch of other stuff. So over here you have your kit mics, and this is a summing of pretty much all the mics together, creating like room mics, overheads. So these are actual effects. They're not exactly, they couldn't actually be recordings of it unless they had another group for it, but they really, on this one, it's more of just convolution blending. So this one's pretty cool though. All right, so another cool thing about this is you have a bunch of grooves built into it. I can take those grooves out of here and drop them into my tracks, and then kind of use them however I want. Say if I was making some halftime. So In our groove section, we have a ton of different grooves. So we know how to mix it. Now we can groove it. So there's some drum and bass shit in here. Mid time, bro. Fuck, bro. No. No. Okay, so you gotta double click it to load it in, and then use the crosshair to drag it out. So that kick drum is ringing super hard. So we're gonna kind of mess with that a little bit. Oh, it's actually this multi-sampler here. It's just like, what's going on? Okay, so gonna mute that. It's all good. We got our hidden auxiliary percussion as well. So you can also go and replace a lot of this stuff. This is kind of what I do with it when I go and actually use this. Because I have all this new velocity information to work with, all these different hi-hat patterns to kind of like pick and choose what I want to do with. You can even modulate what's there. So command, drag up and down will keep their relative points while drawing the actual velocity back. Make an actual halftime beat here, which is really just hip hop. Let's say halftime again. Okay, so this is what I'm trying to show you here, not get into designing a beat, although I can just go on that for another 30 minutes. All right, so velocity layers are really, really crucial in this, especially if you're trying to make it sound real. So I just created four, I think they're 16th notes here. Oh, 64th notes. So they're really fast. It is halftime. Okay, so I'm gonna highlight those and then hold down command and then create a little velocity curve. In Pro Tools, you can do stuff with like exponential curves and calculate randomness. But I just go and draw a linear curve here and that's fine. Sweet. So, kind of see how that works there. Me personally, I don't like how much room there is in the kick. I would want to kind of pull that back. A little too much overheads. Okay. So you kind of see how that works. You know, can mix everything together in here. The sends, they have their different values over here. There's a global verb you can send everything to as well. But yeah, mostly you're going to be kind of like working with these different settings in here to kind of like give it a little bit more presence. And so when you're giving drums presence, you're bringing them more forward in the mix and be more forward in the mix. Oops. Oh, shit. Oh, my bad. My bad, y'all. All right. So backing up here. Oh, man. Like I had actually reset my computer before this because Streamlabs was taking a shit. But yeah, that's all good. So let's just hear this now. My bad about that. But yeah, didn't go too deep, so that's good. Okay, but yeah, so these guys over here definitely want to kind of like pull them back. Even when I'm like mixing drums like live, I usually keep my overheads like -18, -20 around there. I usually keep my kicks around about -6, snares around -7, -8. And that's still how I mix all my shit. Just gonna use this for a second. Okay, so I'm gonna move on from that. So definitely fuck with all these different grooves in here. There's like a ton of them. Keep on trying to drag this shit. We like the soul and R&B ones as well. These ones are really good for like hip hop stuff if you're looking for that. Like the ride. Then new metal, if you're looking for some metal drums and you don't know how to make like blast beats and shit, this is definitely a place to go. Yeah, you can also change up the groove and stuff, and once you go and change everything in here, it'll go and change up the MIDI. Okay, so pretty much all these different drummers kind of work exactly like this. Vintage drummer, studio drummer. Personally, I really like these older ones just because they have a little bit more character to them, and I can like kind of squash them a little bit more than something that's already pre-processed. All that. All right, so that's cool. Anyways, let's get up another one here. So there's a couple other different samplers in there that are kind of cool. There's the session strings. So what's going on here? Demo timeout? It's ridiculous. All right. These are a little bit interesting. They're pretty much just like articulations in different let's get it triggered here. Yeah, just like different grooves, just like the other things. All right, so I really like the session strings because it's not like there's another string library in here that's actually really good. Oh, the action strings. That was another one that wasn't downloading correctly there. But yeah, we have all these like kind of sequencer controls here, so we can like change up the patterns as well. This is going to be like actual velocity modulation. All right, so it's going to be sequencer length, groove, pretty much the speed. All right, so kind of see how that works here. Pull back the dynamic, takes off all that modulation, becomes sterile. Okay, so you don't have to have it on this animator here, and this is kind of like how you should use it, is in the main mode. So that's going to be an articulation though. So main page is what you see, which is a mixer, contour, bow noise, width, and then different sets of attack and release samples. Sequencer, which is called the animator. In order to use it, it has to be set to on. It's all the way down at the bottom there. So yeah, I like the sustain, or I mean, it really just depends on what you want. But yeah, some of these ones are actually really cool. Just like crescendos, and the scoops should be like slides. Yes, to Ori. I did. I also recorded myself playing my stand-up bass as well on that. All right, so then you have your little effects section, convolutions, different halls, compressor, just a one knob smasher. Usually keep strings a little bit less compressed in the high end. Specifically, I also like them to be a little bit darker, just so they kind of blend in. If they're too bright, it doesn't sound as washed. Usually you need at least 2 different sets of reverbs in order to actually blend a bunch of different strings together to actually make them sound real. But yeah, so they have 3 different versions of this here. So they have the performer version, which is if you're going to be playing it in, there's a ton of different articulation things for velocity control, sustain pedals, all that stuff. And then there's production version, which is like if you're going to be using it in large environments here. So it has these key switchers, which the key switches are pretty simple. All they do is switch the articulation with the key that you set it to. So I can set it to trill, and then maybe let's go pizzicato. So it's going to set it whenever I trigger that key. That means C1, if it triggers at the beginning, then it'll give me the trill. Sounds trill dog. Make a little chord here. Okay. Should be triggering this guy right now. Sometimes it has like an actual stroke set where I actually have to use the mod wheel here to actually play it. Also, you do not want round robin on for this because that'll just select the next one. Interesting. It's not letting me select this right now. Ah, that would be why. Ah, okay. Gets all of us. I'm going to change this into pizzicato over here. Okay, so that's how that works. All right, so there's not too many other instruments here that are too crazy to like approach and look at. The bass is pretty straightforward. Kind of shows you all your different notes that you're playing. I'm in snapshot mode right now. I'm gonna get this to Omni. That sounds pretty good. If you want to play like different versions of it, because it is still playing, samples and stuff like that. There's a couple different controls here that you can add to it, which is with the mod wheel. This is vibrato. Player profile, pop country, soul funk. So it's like a different kind of like articulation, and that's like almost picked. All All right, and then auto stroke detection, like if you actually go and write in different 16th notes, then it'll actually play a different sample that is those strums, so it doesn't have any like overlap and, you know, kind of stop up your engine at any point. Then there's also a mixer here so you can get less string noise. That's also mixed in. You got a bunch of different groups that are adding different noise into the instrument just for the sake of adding noise and making it sound real. See the Scarby basses, they're a little bit different. This Rickenbacker one is really for like rock. Sounds good in a lot of stuff though. It kind of has like a P bass like sound, which is kind of like, if you know, just any kind of like funk players. Funk is really based in like the P bass sound, which is neck bass kind of. Yeah, anyways. So this one sounds really good. Just strap an arpeggiator on there and then your Thundercat. All right, so everything else that's like, you know, random percussive kits in here, like Damage. This is just for like impact stuff and for cinema or, you know, really hard music. So I really like these drums though, because they're really heavy and really, you know, just textured and deep. So there's a lot of really good ones in here. Definitely try all those out. Okay, so not gonna waste any more time in here. Definitely lost a lot of y'all not having audio. It's a huge fuck. Oh well. But, you know, for those that are still here, I'm not gonna just sample stuff. So let's set up a sampler. Okay, so I have all this shit laid out inside my arrangement, but I actually made it inside the session view. So 60 different notes here that are kind of just laid out. So we can just drag them and drop them in here. So it should copy them over. And then you can see all of the notes kind of laid out here. Oh man. So let's actually reverse. All right, so I'm gonna put these to the right notes really quick. And this one should be D1. So obviously that's really easy to do. I don't need to kind of like hold your hand through that. But, you know, definitely how this whole thing works here. So you got to make sure that everything is labeled and mapped out correctly. So that's kind of like the whole purpose of everything. So you don't have to go and individually sample each one of them, although you can, and it's encouraged because that's how you get the best samples. But you can go and batch record everything just like this if you wanted to record just the sound and the stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna do a couple different versions of this. So I'm gonna make a multi-sampler right now, and we're gonna make it out of simpler because sampler doesn't have a granular engine inside of it, so that's definitely a limitation of it. Okay, so I'm gonna make kind of like a pad here really quick. I'm gonna make a dual oscillator weirdo pad. So I'm gonna go do some undertone modulation here. Push this up a couple octaves. Listen to it too. sounds good. Perfect. It actually is the sound I want. So I'm going to texture it with some reverb and then some saturation as well. All right, so I'm just going to give this a harder curve. All right, so I'm going to sample this so it kind of develops a bit longer over time. And then also going to extend this note here. And then I'm just going to bounce it offline. There's a lot of MIDI on this track, so I'm actually going to go and do all this to a separate track here. That's chill. I'm not going to duplicate these, so I'm just going to drag them over. All right, so this one's going to be a little bit higher in pitch. Cool. All right, so now I'm going to bounce it offline. And when I say that, I mean freezing, offline bouncing. Okay, so now I'm going to take this piece of audio here and just drop it onto this. In theory, it turns into a track, but I need to convert into audio first. Cool. All right, so and do that there. So in our instrument racks, now we have the option to go and put this into a key tracking section. So it's always going to be key tracked, so the root note is locked. So that means I can create multiple different instances here, and this will be how we can go and just distribute all these different ranges really quickly and just split them up into different key ranges. So that means I can set my lower range below whatever I set here, C1 below whatever. I can change this sampler into texture if I want, which I definitely want on there. And then tones on the mids. And then we'll use beats. I can also stack these as well. So with this, actually, I'm going to stack two different samplers. I'm just going to set the copies to beats and then chop them up with a rhythm. So you need to be set to off mode, so it works exactly like the clips. So I'm setting this second guy up here to chop up the sample in 16th notes, set to off mode. Okay, so I was layering this for like a sound design texture thing. I definitely want to high pass and create this layer and probably this layer, which are my first two layers. So I'm just looking at them as the way I'm grouping them here. And this is multi-sampling as well. This is using the instrument rack to use sampler as a multi-sampler now. would you be able to create this in the FL piano roll? I believe so. I believe you can do kind of the same thing, and FL does have it kind of laid out with the MIDI piano roll in kind of the same way. It's a little bit easier to do in Ableton just for this. But there are definitely some like batch commands that you can do. It's the easiest in Pro Tools and Logic though. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing over here, high pass. So this layer also is more of a texture, and that other one's giving me pitch, so I can actually repitch this. So I like to kind of carve out layers. I don't like them to have the full range. So if I'm going to be carving out the lows on one, I'm going to be carving out the highs on another. And this one's cool. I think it's just a little bit too in your face though. Yeah, to Mary. Definitely easy in direct wave, but also just setting it up in contacts as well. It's really just about setting up your consolidated regions and stuff. So this is a way so you can be a little bit more creative with it. So I'd actually do this while I'm producing to create sounds. So I feel like this is more accessible to pretty much everybody with this type of sound design. And kind of the best thing is if I record this at C, and this is the only thing to keep in mind about like how to actually set up your sample for like simpler or a monosampler turned into a multisampler, which is how Iris works as well, is pretty much setting up your different layers and how everything kind of develops on top of it, you know. But just centered around C. So you don't use any other notes besides C. If you're going to be doing it from like a low note, do it C1, C0, but always start from C. Because you don't have any way to reference root note in Simpler, so then you can just kind of copy and paste and do whatever you want from something you've designed without having to like think about it too much. I should have velocity still set up on these guys as well. So that's just going to turn down the samples. Cool. All right, so it's pretty easy to do that stuff. You can also layer in textures with chords and stuff like that. So if you wanted to do that, I'd probably do that a higher layer So I'm going to do C4 up here, and I'm going to do a ninth chord. So I'm going to add a second, put it up an octave, and then going to add a extra, let's do a seventh there. Jesus, that's so loud. I'm just going to print that. So that's what happens when you have 32-bit audio. You can just pull it down when it clips. Okay, so I'm going to layer this higher here. I trim this range, so this is the key zone where it's being played, to the mid-range. All right, so I'm also gonna kind of blend these regions together here now. Now that I'm kind of like hearing them kind of play together, I kind of like the way they overlap. So now I'm going to trim the zones to pretty much where I had them set already, but I'm gonna have them mixed together with this zone blending, which is pretty much just crossfading. All right, so that's cool. That's all from samples and stuff, so that's chill. Okay, so I'm gonna move on from that, and we're gonna go to samplers now. All right, so I'm only gonna kind of like show you how to do about 2 octaves here because it does take kind of a minute to set up. But I have everything laid out here, and you can use this template for whatever you want. Just don't go and sell it. It'd be weird. I don't even know how you would sell this. Just something I have to say with everything I give out. Okay, so I'm just gonna make this a sine wave sampler for now. So I'm gonna take off this operator patch. Oop. Okay, so that's chill. I'm gonna go and freeze that. And also, you know, I've noticed I'm not right-clicking to freeze. So that is a key command that I created in Mac. I'm sure I've shown everybody how to make that, but just for the sake of knowing it again, if you're on Mac specifically. And there's a couple different apps for Windows that do this as well, but this is just a built-in thing. So just app, just pretty much your app shortcuts here. Create a new program inside of here, so you just go and find it inside the list, application, menu title, type in whatever you want to create a key command for. So I created one for freeze, flatten, unfreeze, file manager, collect all and save, lock envelopes. This one is now one, I believe. But these two are definitely crucial. So when one is on, the other doesn't exist. So you can assign it to the same exact key command. So Control F for both, because Control is not used for anything else. Okay, so let's how to do that. Gonna option drag this over to my next line here. So everything has a little freeze tag on it, but it is not a new region yet. It is sourcing one big freeze. So I have to go down the line and just Command J everything. Also, you know, if I was going to name this something, I would put that name after as well, just so I know what I'm looking at. So I'm just going to do like 2 octaves here. It's actually pretty interesting making really weird multisamplers. And there's a contact user library out there that allows you to go and use other random multisamplers people have made. Which, that one's actually really cool because a lot of people mess around with the AT more filter in weird ways. Okay, so I'm going to make a sampler here. Okay, so now that I have a couple octaves here nicely chopped up, I can open up my zone list, drag, drop, and it will save my actual names here. So what does it look like if I don't do that? Just drag these guys in here. Alright, so that's what it'll look like. You won't have any names attached to any of the files. So you want to make sure you consolidate it first. Alright, so I did up to C3, which pretty much I'm going to make C1 go all the way down and C3 go all the way up. So I'm just going to fill in the rest of the range after that. But I got 2 octaves of just straight sine waves. So why is this important or cool? Like, say if you had a outboard synthesizer that you wanted to go and sample and make a sampler of, and you wanted to use it inside of whatever. This is how you go and do that. You'd have to just go and run the MIDI that you have here through the synth and go record it, chop it up, and you can make a sampler pretty much of anything you decide to rent. That's really kind of the big thing. Okay, so we have our root notes up here. We have the right click, distribute ranges equally, but now we have distribute ranges around root key. So there's no way to go and find root key here besides knowing what our label on it says. So notice as I'm not going to go and click any of these right now. Like if I want to sort them by alphabetical order, this is going to group all the C's together, including the octave ranges, so I don't want to do that. But velocity and selector, those are all really good. You know, just not something we're going to do right now. So what I do to start is I shift everything down to the lowest root note. And this is just working in samplers specifically, so that's C1. So it's highlighted on all of them. So now, like, you might be thinking, oh, fuck, dude, I gotta go and do all that. Yeah, kinda. But now you can just go and hold down Option and drag all these guys. Just clicking from the R, you can drag them to their next note or to their actual note. So that's why I started from C1, because then I just have the reference point and I can just drag it pretty easily for a couple octaves. Yeah, so this shouldn't take that long comparatively to having to go and like open up each different thing and assign it. Essentially, we want a sampler to go and do this for us, because obviously this is kind of a mindless task that is based on something that is in the naming convention already. So, you know, Automator, again, SoundMiner to get all that shit inside of it if you just have a group of samples outside of here. But using the freeze functions definitely work well as just to kind of like get everything labeled out here. So everything's set to its root note besides this last one. Now I can right click, distribute ranges around root key, and then it creates my sampler for me. Okay, so now I have all these samples selected, and these are a short 1 bar as well. So now I'm going to want to go and loop these. Kind of want the loops to be somewhat similar. So I can look at one of the samples and just kind of like get a feel for where the loop is. But you do want to trim the loop off at the start and get it off at the end as well, so you can create a crossfade. So, it's going to be labeled in samples. So if you're looking at all of them, it's kind of hard to go and say, hey, I'm going to go and push this 8,000 samples. So want to go and look at one first so you can actually see what's going on. And then you can go and apply batch commands to all of them. So if you want to reset this, should be able to delete. It's not working for me right now, but I can trim it all the way back to the start. It'll be good. Okay. So I'm just going to set that to 8,000 there. And also in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see your range from where it's set to where. Whenever you have an asterisk inside of this, it'll mean there's a range from two different resting points on the parameters there. So if it's at 55,000 roughly on the lowest range, I can just type in 55,000. I'll just snap both those to there. That's kind of where it should be. So now I have range for myself to crossfade. All right, so you can do this with pretty much anything. I've done it with a lot of stuff from like VCV Rack or, hardware synths and stuff. Really cool thing is being able to add FM to it, because it's going to add it to all the samples. Kind of changes the sample sound instantly. Let's actually load up Shimmer. Okay, so that's pretty simple. Again, it's just like having to go down the line and mark out all your root notes and stuff, and it's gonna make sure everything's organized so you can nicely set it here. Okay, so is any like really specific questions about how this works? Anybody like really confused in the chat right now that has a question about how to map out samples in Sampler? Yeah, they'll definitely make an update at some point. Been waiting for like 2 different versions for them to actually set this up and get it to automap. N19 and NNXT have already had this for years, so it's kind of one of those things that it's a big maybe if they actually do it. But I like to have samplers built into here, so they actually, allow me to just set up samples that are from my session, because if I'm working in a different sampler, kind of locks me out of different functions. Like contact is a little bit limited with just getting samples straight out of the arrangement. So there's a kind of a different way that you have to go about it. All right, so yeah, we're gonna move on here. One thing I actually do quite often with samplers is I'll go and actually like record something straight out of my monitors, and then I'll put it into a sampler. I do that for a lot of intros and stuff. Like pretty much all of the surrounding sounds in that one track in Darkened are from my monitors, pretty much me re-recording a lot of sounds I was making out of Simplant. Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely like kind of like sort in different notes in there. Yeah, it's just really, it needs to be built into sampler, so it organizes it specifically for the list and from metadata. So it'd have to read this tag, know how to separate stuff. Okay, so moving on into Contact now before we kind of like finish up for today. It's just been one of those weeks, y'all. Just shitstorm after shitstorm. Don't even want to talk about it. Okay, so I'm just gonna load up Contact here. I guess it did read my thing. All right. So I'm gonna load it up there, and we're gonna grab them. Okay. So we're gonna create a new instrument. New instrument. All right. So load up an instrument. Looks like this. You have your output settings here. It's always gonna be stereo 1, just for when you're designing something small. Omni as well. So we have our actual source engine here. So we have a bunch of different algorithms. So DFD and sampler are kind of like the different, just repitching algorithms. DFD is saving a little bit more of the kind of interpolation of everything, whereas sampler is just kind of like free running kind of tape pitch. Then tone machine, time machine, beat machine. Tone machine is going to be like tones from Ableton. What does that mean? It's a monophonic granular warping algorithm, so it can only lock onto single pitches at a time. So that means if it's stretched out beyond recollection, then it'll just kind of lock into single tones. Hence why it's called tones, tone machine. All right, so time machine is polyphonic. Time Machine 1 and 2 are from legacy versions of Contact. And then Time Machine Pro has full-on format control. So you can actually kind of, control more of, say, like a vocal or anything you're trying to keep intact for the actual sound. All right, so Beat Machine, that is how you can use it as a Rex player. And this will chop up your audio. You can also use, so internal trigger will be triggered from the wave editor. And all that tracking will be from the wave editor as well. So that's probably one of the more complicated ones to set up just for now. So we have the S1200 and the MP60 as well. These are a little bit more degraded. SP1200 is trying to be, or the S1200 is trying to be like the SP1200, and that is kind of limited to 12 bits, so it's a little bit darker. So yeah, that's really the differences there. So you can use just those engines by themselves and drop in one random sampler or whatever. So like something I just kind of grabbed out of here. All right, so it sounds really good just by itself. So this is using Contact as a mono sampler right now. So I'm not setting up multiple samples. I'm not dropping in multiple things. Root note is unknown. I don't know the root note of this sample. Root note is currently set at neg C2. So whenever you drop it in, by default, it'll set the root note to the lowest range that you set it to. So usually you want to drop in like some random sample that you put in here around C2 to C3. Okay, so pretty simple. All right, so there's a ton of different functions up here. There's auto mapping functions, auto ranging functions. This is auto range. This is auto range for velocity and key range. Then we can auto map the selection based off of different auto map settings. So just getting into that now. So I'm gonna get all of these samples that I kind of like cut up here. I want to get them into their own group or just own little folder. See if it lets me do something like that. So we can actually just go and take these straight from our browser, and that's kind of how I've been doing it. It would be really nice if they allow me to drag all these out. So I'm just going to put that to the test right now. Nope. All right, so do you have to drag them out individually? I don't really drag them out at all. Interesting. Okay, so I'm gonna just drag them in here just for now. That shouldn't be happening. Tact. All right, so first I'm gonna check my folder to see if they're organized in a usable way here. So sort by kind, because you don't want them to be next to their... Yeah, so that ASD file is definitely annoying. All right, so I might be able to grab these. It's not in order.